Everyone believed my dad died of a heart attack, until I played the voice recording he made on the night he died. When my mom's new boyfriend moved in, I was 13. Dad had passed away 8 days ago. He died from a heart attack that made no sense. One day, he was teaching me how to eat healthier and bragging about how he'd never smoked a day in his life. And the next, I was standing over his hospital bed while the monitor went flat. The first thing Mom's boyfriend Cyrus did was drink from Dad's world's best father coffee mug. Mom poured it like it was already routine. But it wasn't just Dad's things he was claiming. Cyrus had this way of looking at me that made my skin crawl. His eyes would follow me across the room, lingering too long when I reached for something on a high shelf. He'd accidentally walk in while I was changing, apologizing with this smile that never reached his eyes. When I told Mom, he made me uncomfortable. She sighed like I was being difficult. Cyrus is just being friendly, Jasmine. Stop making this harder than it needs to be. But the more Mom pushed me to accept Cyrus, the more questions started eating at me. I couldn't stop thinking about how healthy Dad had been. He ran every morning, had his cholesterol checked monthly because he was paranoid about his family history. The doctor even joked he'd live to be 100. So at dinner one night, I mentioned it. Dad never had heart problems before. Cyrus set down his fork slowly, stared right at me and said, "Hearts are unpredictable. Sometimes they just stop." He said it like he was enjoying some private joke. Mom just snapped at me to stop dwelling on the past. I thought if I could just get proof, she would have to listen. So I started recording Cyrus on my phone when he'd make his creepy comments about me becoming a woman, or how mature I looked in my school uniform. But he found it, grabbed my phone right out of my hands one day and deleted everything while maintaining eye contact. Then he showed Mom the empty recordings folder and said I'd been trying to frame him. Mom took my phone away as punishment, said I was poisoning our fresh start. That's when things got worse. I started pushing my dresser against my door at night, but Mom noticed. "Why is your furniture moved?" she demanded. When I told her I didn't feel safe, she actually removed my bedroom door. We don't keep secrets in this family. Cyrus started coming in whenever he wanted. "Just checking on you, sweetheart," he'd whisper, sitting on my bed while I pretended to sleep. I started sleeping in my closet with the door closed, and when Mom found me there, she yanked me out. "What is wrong with you? Are you having some kind of breakdown?" She grabbed my shoulders. "Maybe you need therapy, Jasmine. This isn't normal." Dad had been dead for 6 weeks by then, and I felt like I was drowning. Every day Cyrus got bolder, Mom got blinder, and I got more desperate. I missed Dad so much it physically hurt, not just because I needed protection, but because none of this made sense. How fast Mom moved on. How Cyrus seemed to already know our house layout the first day he arrived. I went to Dad's old home office one night while they were watching TV. Cyrus had taken it over, of course, but I just needed to find something. Anything that still smelled like Dad or had his handwriting on it. That's when I spotted it, shoved behind the bookshelf like someone had tried to hide it. Dad's old iPad. 3% battery. The screen lit up, and the last app open was voice recorder. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. The recording was dated right before we left for the hospital, 11:35 p.m. He'd labeled it grocery list, which was weird because Dad always just texted himself reminders. I looked at the bedroom door, heard Cyrus laugh at something on the TV downstairs, and pressed play. Dad's voice filled the room and I almost sobbed. It started off with him listing groceries he needed from Aldi, and then Cyrus walked into the room while he was recording. Then confusion in his tone. "Melissa, what's he doing here? It's midnight." I heard muffled voices, movement, then Mom's voice, sweet and calm. "Just drink your juice, Tony. It'll help you sleep. It tastes..." "Melissa, what did you..." Dad sounded drowsy, confused. Then Cyrus's voice, matter of fact, "Should take about 3 minutes. Potassium, untraceable." The iPad slipped in my hands. Dad's voice was getting distant, like he'd dropped the phone. "Jasmine, our daughter, she'll be fine," Cyrus said. "I'll take good care of her." I was so focused on memorizing every detail, proving Dad was murdered, that I didn't hear the TV downstairs go quiet, didn't hear the footsteps on the stairs. "I see you found your dad's old things, Jasmine." Cyrus's slimy voice kicked my nervous system into flight or fight. "You know your mom doesn't like that." My hands shake so bad I almost dropped the iPad right there on the floor. I slammed my thumb on the lock button and shoved the thing deep in my hoodie pocket, trying to keep my face normal even though my heart is beating. So loud I swear Cyrus can hear it from where he's standing in the doorway. I need to get out of this room right now. I grab my stomach and make my voice sound weak and desperate. I feel really sick. I need the bathroom. Cyrus doesn't move for 3 long seconds, just stands there staring at me with those cold eyes and I can feel sweat starting on my back. Then he steps to the side and I rush past him so fast I almost trip on the hallway rug. I lock the bathroom door behind me and lean against it, breathing hard. The iPad is burning a hole in my pocket. I pull it out with fingers that won't stop shaking and tap the screen. 2% battery left. I open my school email on the browser, the one Mom doesn't know about because I set it up at the library last year. My fingers fumble on the tiny keyboard as I attach the voice recording file. The attachment takes forever to load and I keep glancing at the door like Cyrus might break it down any second. I type Ms. Reeves's email address, the counselor who was nice to me after Dad died, and hit send. The progress bar crawls across the screen slower than anything I've ever watched in my life. Come on, come on, come on. The battery drops to 1% and the bar is only halfway. I press my other hand against my mouth to keep from making noise. Finally, the email shows sent. I delete it from the sent folder on the iPad itself so there's no trace. Then the screen goes black. Dead battery. I stuff the iPad deep in my backpack under my math textbook and Spanish folder, then flush the toilet even though I didn't use it. I wash my hands and stare at my face in the mirror. I look pale and scared. I take a few deep breaths and open the door. Cyrus is standing right there in the hallway waiting for me. I force myself not to run, not to look guilty, even though my legs want to bolt down the stairs and out the front door. Going to bed, I mumble without looking at his face. I walk as normally as I can to my doorless room, and the second I'm inside, I shove my dresser against the opening. It won't stop him, but at least I'll hear it move if he tries to come in. I climb into bed with all my clothes on, including my hoodie, and pull the blanket up to my chin. My backpack is on the floor right next to the bed where I can grab it fast if I need to. I lie there in the dark, listening to every sound in the house. The TV goes off downstairs, footsteps on the stairs, Mom and Cyrus talking in low voices in their bedroom. Then around midnight, I hear footsteps in the hallway, and the dresser scrapes against the floor as it gets pushed aside. I squeeze my eyes shut and try to breathe like I'm sleeping. The bed dips as Cyrus sits down on the edge. His hand touches my hair and starts stroking it. Slow and creepy, and my whole body wants to scream, but I stay perfectly still. "Sweet dreams, sweetheart," he whispers right next to my ear. Then he leaves. 2 hours later, he comes back and does it again, sitting there for even longer this time, and I have to bite the inside of my cheek to keep from crying or throwing up. When he finally leaves the second time, I open my eyes in the dark and stare at the ceiling. I'm not sleeping tonight. No way. I lie there planning every detail of tomorrow. I need to get to the school early, before first period, and go straight to Ms. Reeves's office. She checks her email first thing every morning. She'll see the recording. She'll believe me. She has to believe me. I go over and over what I'll say to her, how I'll explain everything. The sky starts getting light outside my window around 6. I hear Mom's alarm go off and then the shower running. I get up and grab my backpack, checking to make sure the iPad is still buried under my books. At breakfast, Mom is pouring coffee and Cyrus is reading something on his phone. Rain is hitting the kitchen window hard. Mom looks at me and frowns. "It's pouring out there. Cyrus should drive you to the school." My stomach drops. "I'm fine walking." "Don't be ridiculous, Jasmine." Cyrus looks up from his phone with that smile that makes my skin crawl. "I don't mind at all. I'll be checking on you later anyway." I clutch my stomach again, using the same trick from last night. I feel sick again. Stomach cramps. I need to get to the school early anyway to make up a test I missed. Mom's eyes narrow like she's suspicious, but I keep my face pinched in pain. "What test?" "Math. Ms. Reeves set it up for me." That part's a lie, but Mom doesn't know my schedule well enough to check. Cyrus is still watching me, but I don't look at him. I grab my backpack and head for the front door before either of them can argue. I'm leaving now or I'll be late. I'm out the door and down the front steps before Mom can say anything else. The rain soaks through my hoodie in seconds, but I don't care. I walk fast down our street, my backpack heavy on my shoulders, looking back every few seconds to make sure Cyrus isn't following me in his car. 3 houses down is Marta's place, the neighbor with the garden who always waves at me when I'm walking to the bus stop. I've never actually talked to her much, but right now she's my only option. I run up her front steps and knock on the door, probably too hard. She opens it wearing a bathrobe and holding a coffee mug, looking surprised. "Jasmine? Honey, what's wrong? Can you give me a ride to the school? Please?" My voice comes out shaky and desperate. She takes one look at my face, at how I'm soaked from the rain and shaking, and doesn't ask any more questions. "Let me grab my keys." She comes back 30 seconds later with her purse and car keys, and we run through the rain to her sedan parked in the driveway. I climb into the passenger seat and clutch my backpack against my chest, feeling the iPad press through the fabric. Marta starts the engine and pulls out onto the street, windshield wipers going fast. The heater blows warm air that makes my wet clothes stick to my skin. We drive for maybe 2 minutes in silence before Marta glances over at me. She asks if everything is okay at home, her voice soft and careful. I don't mean to cry, but suddenly tears are streaming down my face and I can't stop them. I press my palms against my eyes and try to breathe, but it comes out in these horrible gasping sounds. Marta reaches over and squeezes my shoulder once, then puts her hand back on the wheel. She tells me she's been worried about me for a while now. She says she's noticed Cyrus's car at our house at weird hours, even before Dad died, and it never sat right with her. I wipe my face with my wet sleeve and nod because I can't get words out. She doesn't push for more details, just keeps driving and tells me I can talk to her anytime I need to. When we pull up to the school, the parking lot is mostly empty because it's still early. I thank her and grab my backpack, running toward the main entrance through the rain. The hallways are quiet except for a few teachers setting up their classrooms. I head straight for the counseling office, my sneakers squeaking on the tile floor. Ms. Reeves's door is closed, but the light is on inside. I knock 3 times, harder than I mean to. She opens the door holding a coffee mug, and her expression changes when she sees my face. I tell her I need to talk about something serious, and my voice comes out shaky and desperate. She sets down her mug and closes the door behind me, gesturing for me to sit in the chair across from her desk. I drop into it and pull the iPad out of my backpack, setting it on her desk with trembling hands. The words start pouring out of me in this jumbled rush. I tell her about finding the iPad in Dad's office, about the recording labeled grocery list, about hearing Dad's voice and then hearing Cyrus and Mom. I explain about the potassium and how Dad was so healthy, and how Cyrus moved in 8 days after Dad died. Ms. Reeves leans forward and asks if she can listen to the recording. I unlock the iPad and press play, and Dad's voice fills the small office. Ms. Reeves's hand goes over her mouth as she listens. When the recording ends with Cyrus saying he'll take good care of me, she sits back in her chair and stares at the iPad. She tells me this is evidence of a crime and she's legally required to report it, which is exactly what I was hoping she'd say. She picks up her phone and starts making calls while I sit there shaking. She calls CPS first, then the school resource officer. Within an hour, there are 3 adults crammed into her office. The resource officer is this tall guy with a crew cut who takes notes on everything I say. Ms. Reeves makes a copy of the recording using the school's secure server, saving it to 3 different locations. The resource officer explains they need to contact the police detective unit right away, because this is a murder investigation now. Someone mentions calling my mom, and I feel panic spike in my chest. My phone starts ringing in my backpack, and I pull it out to see Mom's name on the screen. Ms. Reeves tells me not to answer it yet, and I let it go to voicemail. 20 minutes later, the school secretary knocks on the door and tells Ms. Reeves that my mom is in the main office. She's demanding to take me home and claiming I'm having a mental health crisis that needs immediate help. The resource officer stands up and says he'll handle it. Ms. Reeves stays with me, and I can hear Mom's voice getting louder in the hallway outside the counseling office. She's yelling about her rights as my parent and how the school can't keep me from her. The principal's voice cuts through, calm but firm, telling Mom that I'm staying on campus for the day and they'll be in touch. Mom's voice gets even louder, threatening to call her lawyer and sue the school. Eventually, I hear footsteps walking away, and then the main entrance door slamming. Ms. Reeves asks me if I feel safe going home today. I tell her the truth, that Cyrus comes into my room at night and sits on my bed, that Mom took my bedroom door away, so I can't lock it. I tell her about sleeping in my closet and how Mom said I was having a breakdown. Ms. Reeves writes everything down on a legal pad, her pen moving fast across the paper. She tells me I'm very brave for speaking up, and that she's going to make sure I stay safe. A CPS worker named Brandon arrives after lunch. He's younger than I expected, maybe 30, wearing khakis and a button-down shirt. He takes me to a private conference room and closes the door. He asks detailed questions about Cyrus's behavior and writes down my answers in a notebook. I tell him everything, including how Mom poured Cyrus coffee from Dad's mug just days after the funeral, how Cyrus knew our house layout the first day he arrived, how he looks at me in a way that makes my skin crawl. Brandon asks about the recording, and I explain the timeline again, how Dad made it right before we went to the hospital. Detective Sandoval shows up next, a serious woman with kind eyes and dark hair pulled back in a ponytail. She sits across from me and explains that proving a poisoning case is really hard, especially if Dad was already cremated or buried. My heart sinks because I hadn't thought about that part. She says the recording is still valuable evidence, though, and combined with everything else I've told them, they have enough to open an investigation. She asks if I know whether Dad was cremated or buried, and I tell her buried, at the cemetery on Maple Street. She writes that down and tells me they'll look into getting permission to do new tests. Ms. Reeves brings me lunch from the cafeteria, a sandwich and chips and a bottle of water. She sits with me in her office while I eat, telling me the school will keep me safe today while the adults figure out the next steps. I feel exhausted, but also relieved that people finally believe me. My hands stop shaking for the first time all day. Around 2 o'clock, the school secretary knocks again and tells Ms. Reeves that Marta is here. Detective Sandoval comes back into the office with Marta following behind her, and Marta gives me this sad smile that makes me want to cry again. Detective Sandoval sits Marta down in the chair next to mine and opens her notebook to a fresh page. Marta tells Detective Sandoval that she saw Cyrus's car parked in our driveway at least 6 times before Dad died, always late at night around 11 or midnight. She says she remembered because it seemed weird that Mom would have someone over that late when Dad was home, and she thought maybe it was a work friend or something. Detective Sandoval asks what kind of car it was, and Marta describes it perfectly. A dark blue sedan with a dent on the passenger side door. She says the last time she saw it was 2 nights before Dad went to the hospital, and the lights in our house were still on past midnight. Detective Sandoval writes everything down and thanks Marta for coming forward, and Marta squeezes my shoulder before she leaves for work. After Marta goes, Detective Sandoval pulls out a clear plastic bag and a form from her briefcase. She explains that she needs to take the iPad as evidence and follow proper procedures to make sure it can be used in court. She seals the iPad inside the bag and writes the date and time on a label, then has me sign a form saying I gave it to her voluntarily. Watching her zip it into her briefcase makes my chest feel tight because that iPad is the only proof I have, and now it's going somewhere I can't see it. Detective Sandoval must notice my face because she tells me the recording is also backed up on the school's server, so there are multiple copies now. She says the iPad will be kept in a secure evidence locker at the police station, and only authorized people can access it. About 20 minutes later, a man in a suit walks into the office and Detective Sandoval introduces him as Edward, a forensic pathologist who works with the medical examiner's office. Edward sits down across from me and explains his job in a way that doesn't make me feel stupid. He says potassium is really hard to detect after someone dies, because everyone's body naturally has potassium in it. The problem is that potassium levels can change after death, so even if they test Dad's body now, it might not show anything unusual. He asks me if Dad was buried or cremated, and I tell him buried at the cemetery on Maple Street. Edward nods and says that's good because it means they could potentially dig up the body and do new tests, but he warns me it's expensive and not guaranteed to work. He explains that if Dad was injected with potassium chloride, it would have caused his heart to stop really fast, which matches what happened at the hospital. Detective Sandoval thanks Edward and he leaves, and then Brandon comes back into the office looking serious. Brandon sits down and tells me that CPS has decided to place me in emergency foster care tonight because it's not safe for me to go home. My stomach does this weird flip where I feel scared and relieved at the exact same time. Ms. Reeves reaches over and squeezes my hand, promising she'll check on me tomorrow and make sure I'm okay. Brandon explains that a foster family has already been contacted and they're expecting me tonight, and he'll take me there himself after we finish at the CPS office. He says I can't go back to my house to get my things because Mom and Cyrus might be there, so CPS will provide basic stuff until they can arrange a supervised visit to collect my belongings. Around 4 o'clock, Brandon drives me to the CPS building downtown in his car. We're sitting in a conference room filling out paperwork when the receptionist comes in and says my mom and Cyrus are in the lobby demanding to see me. Brandon tells her to have them wait and he goes out to talk to them. Through the glass window in the door, I can see Mom and Cyrus standing at the front desk with this thick folder. When Brandon comes back 10 minutes later, his jaw is tight and he looks angry. He tells me that Mom and Cyrus brought printed copies of emails and text messages, claiming I've been having behavior problems and making up stories for attention. Cyrus apparently told the CPS supervisor that I've been acting out in inappropriate ways, and they were already planning to get me therapy before I made these accusations. Hearing Brandon repeat what Cyrus said makes me feel sick, like I might actually throw up right there on the conference room table. Ms. Reeves, who came with us to CPS, stands up and says she has documentation of every interaction with me, and there's never been any indication of behavior problems. She pulls out her own folder with notes from our meetings and my academic records showing I'm a good student. The CPS supervisor reviews both sets of documents and decides that regardless of the behavior claims, the recording is serious enough that I need to stay in protective custody while they investigate. Mom starts yelling in the lobby about her rights and how they can't just take her daughter, but security asks them to leave. After Mom and Cyrus finally go, Ms. Reeves sits with me at the conference table and helps me write down everything I remember. She has me start from the beginning, from the day Dad died, and write down exact dates and times for everything. I write about Cyrus drinking from Dad's mug 8 days after the funeral, about him walking in on me changing, about Mom taking my bedroom door away. Ms. Reeves tells me to include specific things people said, not just what happened, because details matter. She explains that kids who make up stories usually can't keep their facts straight, but my memory is clear and consistent, which will help the investigation. We work on the statement for over an hour until my hand cramps from writing. The next afternoon, Detective Sandoval comes to the foster home where I stayed last night. The foster parents are nice, but everything feels weird and temporary, like I'm living in someone else's life. Detective Sandoval sits with me in the living room and tells me she found something important. She says that 3 months before Dad died, Mom increased his life insurance policy from $200,000 to $400,000. The insurance company confirmed it and sent Detective Sandoval copies of the paperwork with Mom's signature. I feel like I'm going to throw up again because that means Mom was planning to kill Dad for at least 3 months. Detective Sandoval explains that the insurance increase is what they call premeditation, which makes the crime more serious. She asks if I remember anything unusual happening 3 months ago, and I tell her that's around when Cyrus started showing up at our house more often. 2 days later, Brandon arranges a supervised phone call with Mom at the CPS office. I sit in a room with Brandon and a speakerphone on the table between us. When Mom's voice comes through, she's crying and begging me to come home. She says Cyrus moved out and she misses me so much and the house is empty without me. For a second, I almost believe her because she sounds so sad. But then she says I'm breaking up our family with lies and destroying her life. She tells me that if I just admit I made everything up, we can go back to normal and be happy again. That's when I realize she's trying to manipulate me the same way she always has, making me feel guilty for her choices. I tell her I love her, but I can't trust her anymore, and Mom starts crying harder. Brandon ends the call after 10 minutes and asks if I'm okay. Later that week, Ms. Reeves calls Brandon and tells him the school security guard reported something concerning. The guard says he saw Cyrus's car in the parking lot near the student pickup area yesterday afternoon, just sitting there with Cyrus inside watching the building. The guard didn't approach him because he didn't know about the situation, but he thought it was weird enough to mention. Detective Sandoval gets the security footage from the school and sees Cyrus's car clearly on camera. She files paperwork for a restraining order that same day, and the judge approves it within hours. The restraining order says Cyrus has to stay at least 500 feet away from me, my school, and anywhere he knows I might be. The next morning, Detective Sandoval shows up at our house with 2 other officers and a search warrant. Brandon calls to tell me about it while it's happening. Detective Sandoval and her team seize Mom and Cyrus's computers, phones, tablets, and any other electronics they can find. They take Mom's laptop, Cyrus's desktop computer from Dad's old office, both their phones, and even an old tablet they find in a drawer. Brandon explains that this is actually a good sign because it means the investigation is moving forward seriously, and they're building a real case. The police will have tech specialists go through everything looking for evidence, including internet searches, deleted messages, and anything else that might prove what happened to Dad. 3 days later, Detective Sandoval calls Brandon and asks if she can come by the foster home to show me something important. She arrives that afternoon with a folder full of papers and sits down with me at the kitchen table. The police tech specialist went through every file on Cyrus's computer and found his search history from 2 weeks before Dad died. Detective Sandoval slides the printed pages across to me and my hands shake as I read the searches. Potassium chloride lethal dose. How much potassium to cause heart attack? Untraceable poisons that mimic natural death. Time for potassium overdose to work. The dates are right there in black and white. October 3rd and October 4th. Exactly 14 days before Dad died. I start crying because this proves I was right all along, that I wasn't crazy or making things up like Mom said. Detective Sandoval puts her hand on my shoulder and tells me this is strong evidence that shows planning and intent. She explains the DA is reviewing everything and building a case, but it takes time to do it properly. Brandon brings me tissues and I wipe my face, feeling this weird mix of relief and anger because now people have to believe me, but it doesn't bring Dad back. The next morning, Edward meets with Detective Sandoval at the police station to review all the evidence together. Brandon tells me about it later that day when he comes to check on me. Edward explained that even with the computer searches and the recording, the case is still what lawyers call circumstantial without Dad's body, or the original blood samples from that night. He suggested requesting an exhumation if Dad was buried, so they can do new toxicology tests on his remains. But Edward warned that exhumations are really expensive, and the DA has to approve it. Plus, Mom's lawyer will probably fight it. Detective Sandoval told Edward she's going to push for it anyway because they need physical evidence to make the case stronger. Brandon explains this stuff to me in simple terms, and I ask if they're going to dig up Dad's grave. He says maybe, if the judge allows it, but it could take weeks or months to get approval. I feel sick thinking about disturbing Dad's resting place, but I know it's the only way to prove what Cyrus and Mom did to him. The CPS hearing happens the next week at the courthouse downtown. Brandon drives me there, and we sit in a small courtroom with wooden benches and fluorescent lights that buzz. Mom shows up with her lawyer, a woman in a gray suit who looks annoyed. Cyrus isn't allowed to come because of the restraining order. The judge is an older man with glasses who reads through all the reports from CPS, the police, and the school. He asks Mom's lawyer some questions about why Cyrus was in the house so much, and why Mom removed my bedroom door. Mom's lawyer tries to explain that Mom was just trying to help me adjust after losing my father, but the judge doesn't look convinced. Then the judge reads his decision out loud. Cyrus cannot have any contact with me at all, not in person or through messages or anything. Mom can only see me with supervision at the CPS office, no home visits. Mom starts crying when he says that, dabbing her eyes with a tissue, but she doesn't look at me once during the whole hearing. I feel guilty even though I know I did the right thing. Like somehow I'm the one breaking up our family instead of her being the one who killed Dad. Brandon squeezes my hand and reminds me this is about keeping me safe, not punishing Mom. Back at the school on Monday, kids start whispering about why I'm not living at home anymore. I hear bits and pieces in the hallway between classes. Some girl from my English class tells people my mom is in jail, which isn't even true. Another kid says I got taken away because I was doing drugs, which is completely made up. The worst rumor is that I accused my stepdad of touching me, and CPS took me away, and kids look at me weird when I walk past. I try to ignore it, but by lunch I feel like everyone is staring at me. I go to Miss Reeves's office instead of the cafeteria, and she can tell something is wrong. I tell her about the rumors, and she gets this determined look on her face. She makes some calls during her lunch break, and by the end of the day, she's talked to all my teachers about giving me privacy and not letting other kids ask questions about my situation. She also tells me I can eat lunch in her office whenever I need a break from the cafeteria, and she sets up a quiet corner with some books and a beanbag chair. It helps knowing someone at the school is looking out for me. That afternoon, Detective Sandoval interviews Mom at the police station with Mom's lawyer sitting right next to her. Brandon gets a copy of the interview transcript later and tells me the important parts. Requested Reads is on Spotify now. Check out link in the description or comments. Mom's timeline of the night Dad died doesn't match what she told the hospital staff when we brought him in. At the hospital, Mom said she woke up and found Dad having chest pains around midnight. But in the police interview, she admits Cyrus came over that night and she gave Dad juice to help him sleep around 11:30. When Detective Sandoval asks why she had Cyrus over at midnight, Mom can't give a good explanation. She just says they were friends and he stopped by sometimes. Detective Sandoval points out that's the same time frame as the voice recording, and Mom's lawyer tells her not to answer any more questions. The interview ends there, but Brandon says the inconsistencies in Mom's story are really damaging to her credibility. I feel angry that Mom is still lying and making excuses instead of just admitting what she did. 2 days later, Edward gets permission from the DA's office to review Dad's hospital records from the night he died. He spends hours going through the lab work and doctor's notes from the emergency room. The blood tests show Dad's potassium levels were dangerously high when he arrived at the hospital, way above normal range. Edward finds a note from the ER doctor saying the elevated potassium was unusual, but he assumed it was from the heart attack itself, not the cause of it. Back then, nobody was looking for poisoning, because Mom said Dad just woke up with chest pains. Edward writes a report explaining that potassium chloride poisoning causes the same symptoms as a heart attack, which is why it's so hard to detect. He sends copies to Detective Sandoval and the DA's office. Brandon tells me this medical evidence combined with everything else makes the case much stronger. I feel this surge of hope that maybe justice for Dad is actually possible. The following Monday, Ms. Reeves gets called into the principal's office and comes back looking stressed. She tells me that Cyrus filed an official complaint with the school district, claiming she coached me to make false accusations against him. The school has to do a full investigation because it's a serious allegation against a staff member. Ms. Reeves sits down with me in her office and explains she's not worried because she followed every protocol correctly and has documentation of everything. She kept detailed notes of every conversation we had, made copies of the recording properly, and reported to the right authorities at the right times. She tells me not to worry because this is just Cyrus trying to fight back and create doubt. But I can see she's a little nervous about the investigation even though she did everything right. I thank her for believing me and helping me, and she says that's what she's here for. The school investigator interviews me the next day, and I tell the truth about everything. Ms. Reeves never told me what to say or coached me. She just listened and followed the law. That same week, CPS does a surprise home visit to check if Mom is following the judge's orders. Brandon tells me about it afterward because I wasn't there, obviously. The caseworker shows up at our house unannounced and finds that Mom changed all the locks, which makes sense for security. But then the caseworker looks around and finds Cyrus's clothes still hanging in the closet in Mom's bedroom. His shoes are by the door, his toothbrush is in the bathroom, and there's a coffee mug with his name on it in the kitchen. The caseworker takes photos of everything as evidence that Cyrus never actually moved out like Mom claimed. The caseworker also goes into my old room and takes pictures of the doorway with no door, the hinges still attached to the frame. She notes in her report that a child's bedroom without a door is inappropriate and concerning. Brandon says this violation of the court order is going to be a big problem for Mom at the next hearing. I feel weirdly satisfied that mom got caught lying again, but also sad that she chose Cyrus over following the rules to get me back. At the school the next day, I'm sitting in math class when a male substitute teacher walks in unexpectedly because our regular teacher is sick. He's tall with dark hair and he comes into the classroom without knocking, just opens the door suddenly. My heart starts racing and I can't breathe right. My vision gets blurry around the edges and my hands start shaking on my desk. The substitute starts taking attendance, but his voice sounds far away and muffled. I feel like the walls are closing in and I need to get out of there right now. I stand up too fast and my chair falls backward with a loud crash. Everyone stares at me and the substitute asks if I'm okay, but I can't answer. I run out of the classroom and down the hall to the nurse's office, my chest tight and painful. The school nurse recognizes me from before and sits me down, telling me to breathe slowly. She calls Brandon because he's listed as my emergency contact now. He shows up 20 minutes later and takes me to the CPS office where I can calm down in private. Later that afternoon, Brandon arranges for me to start seeing a therapist who works with kids who have been through trauma. He says panic attacks are normal after what I've been through and therapy will help me learn to manage them. That night at my foster home, I try to go to sleep in the small bedroom they set up for me. The foster parents are nice people, an older couple whose own kids are grown up and moved out. They have strict house rules about bedtime and chores and screen time, which is fine but different from what I'm used to. The bed is comfortable, but it's not my bed and the room smells different from my old room. I lie there for an hour trying to fall asleep, but I keep thinking about Cyrus coming into my room at night. Without meaning to, I get up and start pushing the dresser across the floor toward the door. It makes a scraping sound on the hardwood and I freeze, hoping I didn't wake anyone up. The foster mom knocks softly and opens the door, finding me standing there with the dresser halfway across the room. She doesn't get mad or ask a bunch of questions. She just comes in and sits on the bed, patting the spot next to her. She tells me gently that I'm safe here, that nobody is going to come into my room at night, that the doors all have locks if I want to use them. She explains that old habits are hard to break, and it's okay that I'm scared, but I don't have to protect myself anymore, because that's her job now. We push the dresser back together, and she shows me how to lock my bedroom door from the inside. I finally fall asleep around midnight with the door locked, feeling a tiny bit safer than I have in months. The next morning, Brandon calls and asks if he can stop by the foster home to update me on the case. He arrives around 10 with a folder of papers and sits with me and my foster parents at the kitchen table. Brandon explains that Marta called Detective Sandoval yesterday and remembered something important about the morning after Dad died. She was taking out her trash early and noticed a heavy garbage bag in our bin that made clinking sounds like glass bottles when the truck picked it up. Detective Sandoval already requested our trash pickup records to see if anything can be tracked down, but Brandon says it's probably gone by now since trash gets buried in landfills. Still, it's another piece that shows something suspicious happened that night. 2 hours later, Detective Sandoval calls Brandon while he's still at the house and asks to talk to me. She tells me the police found a receipt in Cyrus's car during their first search that they're just now following up on. It's from a medical supply store for syringes and something called salt substitute, which she explains contains potassium chloride. The receipt is dated 4 days before Dad died. Detective Sandoval says they pulled the security footage from the store, and it clearly shows Cyrus buying those exact items. My hands start shaking when she tells me this because it proves Cyrus was planning to kill Dad before it happened. Brandon takes the phone back and talks to Detective Sandoval for a few more minutes while I sit there trying to process everything. After he hangs up, Brandon tells me there's more news, but some of it isn't good. The life insurance company found out about the investigation and froze Mom's payout until everything gets resolved. Mom apparently had to hire a lawyer to fight the insurance company, and Brandon says this actually helps our case because it shows even the insurance people think something suspicious happened. He explains that insurance companies have their own investigators, and they don't freeze payments unless they have serious doubts about the death being natural. Over the next few days, I try to focus on the school and settling into my foster home routine, but it's hard not to think about the case constantly. Then one afternoon, my therapist shows me something during our session that makes my stomach hurt. Mom found a way to message me through the supervised communication app that CPS set up. The first message says she loves me and misses me so much and wants me to come home. But the second message, sent just an hour later, says I'm ruining her life and tearing apart our family with lies. My therapist helps me understand that this is manipulation, switching between love and blame to confuse me and make me feel guilty. She teaches me about setting boundaries and explains that I don't have to respond to messages that make me feel bad. We practice what I can say if Mom keeps messaging, and my therapist promises to monitor the app and report anything concerning to Brandon. The next week, Brandon tells me that Edward officially recommended exhuming Dad's body for new toxicology tests. The DA's office is debating whether it's worth the cost and all the publicity that will come with digging up a grave. Detective Sandoval apparently argued hard that without the exhumation results, they might not have enough evidence to charge anyone, since the recording could be challenged in court. Brandon explains that defense lawyers might say the recording was edited or taken out of context, so having scientific proof of the potassium poisoning would make the case much stronger. 3 days later, I'm at the school when Brandon texts Ms. Reeves that the judge approved the exhumation request. Mom's lawyer tried to object and argued it was disrespectful to Dad's memory, but the judge sided with the prosecution. They scheduled it for 3 weeks from now to give everyone time to prepare. When Ms. Reeves tells me during lunch, I feel relieved that we're getting closer to proof, but also sad because disturbing Dad's grave feels wrong, even though I know it's necessary. That same week, CPS has another hearing about my placement. Brandon explains beforehand that they're going to extend my foster care and create something called a case plan for Mom. At the hearing, the judge orders that Mom has to complete counseling sessions and parenting classes before she can have any unsupervised visits with me. Mom tells her lawyer right there in the courtroom that this is completely unfair, and she's being treated like a criminal when she hasn't been charged with anything. Her lawyer tries to get her to stop talking, but Mom keeps arguing until the judge warns her about contempt of court. The judge doesn't change the order, and I stay in foster care for at least another 3 months. 2 days after the hearing, something creepy happens that makes me glad I'm not living at home anymore. Ms. Reeves calls me into her office and shows me a message request on social media from an account I don't recognize. The profile picture is some random landscape photo, and the account was created yesterday. The message says it's Cyrus and he misses me and wants to explain everything if I'll just talk to him. Ms. Reeves already screenshots everything and reports it to Detective Sandoval before I even finish reading. Detective Sandoval tells Brandon this counts as a restraining order violation, and she's adding it to the file. She says Cyrus is getting more desperate as the evidence piles up against him, which makes him more dangerous. Meanwhile, the police execute a second search warrant on Cyrus's car, going through it more carefully this time. Detective Sandoval calls me that evening to tell me they found a small notebook wedged under the passenger seat. Inside the notebook are pages of notes with Dad's work schedule written down, including what time he left the house and what time he got home. There's also my school schedule with notes about what days I had after school activities. Detective Sandoval says this shows premeditation and planning, that Cyrus was watching our family and learning our routines before he made his move. The notes go back almost 2 months before Dad died. Finally, after weeks of waiting and wondering what will happen next, Brandon calls with the biggest news yet. The DA reviewed all the evidence they have so far, including the recording, the computer searches, the receipt and store footage, the notebook, and Marta's statement. They decided they have enough to file charges even before the exhumation results come back, but they want to wait for the toxicology tests to make the case as strong as possible. Detective Sandoval explains this means they're taking everything seriously and believe they can prove what happened beyond reasonable doubt. She tells me the DA usually doesn't move forward unless they're confident they can win at trial. Brandon says we should expect charges to be filed within a month after the exhumation results come back from the lab. I ask what kind of charges, and he explains it will probably be murder for Cyrus and accessory or conspiracy for Mom, depending on what the DA can prove about how much she knew and planned. Hearing him say the word murder out loud makes everything feel more real and scary, but also validates that I wasn't crazy or making things up like Mom tried to claim. 3 days after the DA made their decision, Detective Sandoval called Brandon with news that made him come straight to my foster home. Cyrus got arrested that morning for harassment and witness tampering based on the fake social media messages and being spotted near my school multiple times. Brandon explained the charges while sitting across from me at the kitchen table, his folder open with official-looking papers inside. The arrest happened at Cyrus's apartment around 6 in the morning with 4 officers present. Detective Sandoval told Brandon that Cyrus acted calm during the whole thing, like he expected it. He posted bail 3 hours later using money from somewhere Brandon couldn't track yet, but the judge made him wear an ankle monitor and ordered him to stay at least 5 miles away from our old neighborhood, my school, and anywhere I might be. Brandon showed me a map with red zones marked all over it representing places Cyrus couldn't go. The ankle monitor company would alert police immediately if he entered any restricted area. I asked what happens if he breaks the rules, and Brandon said he'd go straight to jail with no bail option. That same week, someone sent an anonymous email to CPS with a photo attached. Brandon showed me the picture on his phone after school one day. Mom and Cyrus sitting together at a restaurant booth, leaning close and holding hands across the table. The photo had a timestamp from 2 days ago, which meant Mom violated the court order requiring no contact with Cyrus. Brandon filed a violation report that afternoon and requested an emergency hearing. The judge scheduled it for the following Monday. When Brandon told me the judge threatened to take away all of Mom's visitation rights if she kept breaking the rules, I felt guilty even though I knew she did this to herself. The hearing happened in a smaller courtroom than before with fewer people present. Mom sat with her lawyer at one table while Brandon represented CPS at another. The judge read the violation report out loud, including details about the restaurant meeting and how long they stayed there. Mom's lawyer tried to argue that Mom had a right to see whoever she wanted as an adult, but the judge cut him off. The judge tightened Mom's supervision requirements and stated very clearly that she must have 0 contact with Cyrus going forward. Mom stood up right there and argued that this was unfair, that she's an adult who can make her own choices about relationships. Her lawyer grabbed her arm and tried to get her to sit down and stop talking, but Mom kept going. She said the court was treating her like a criminal when she hadn't been charged with anything yet. The judge warned her about contempt of court and told her lawyer to control his client. Mom finally sat down, but I could see her jaw clenched tight with anger. The judge didn't change the order, and I stayed in foster care with even stricter rules about Mom's visits. Ms. Reeves called me into her office the next day during lunch period. She closed the door and asked me to sit in the comfortable chair by her desk. She explained that I might have to testify in court when the trial happens, and she wanted to help me prepare so I wouldn't feel as scared. We spent the whole lunch period practicing how to answer questions. She taught me to take a breath before responding, to say if I don't understand something, and to tell the truth even if it's hard. She showed me breathing exercises for when I feel panicked, counting to 4 while breathing in and counting to 4 while breathing out. We practiced this over and over until it started to feel natural. She told me the defense lawyers might try to confuse me or make me upset, but I should just focus on answering honestly and clearly. The exhumation happened on a cold Thursday morning 3 weeks later. I didn't go because Brandon said it would be too hard for me to watch. Edward supervised the whole process to make sure everything followed proper procedures. Brandon called me that afternoon and said it went smoothly. They took new samples from Dad's body and sent them to the state lab with a priority testing request. Edward explained the samples would be tested for potassium chloride levels and other substances that might have been missed the first time. The lab promised results within 2 weeks because of the active criminal investigation. I tried not to think about Dad's body being disturbed, tried to focus on the fact that this would prove what really happened. 2 weeks felt like 2 months. I went to the school, did my homework, attended therapy sessions, but the whole time I was waiting for the phone to ring. Finally, Brandon called on a Tuesday evening right after dinner. The preliminary toxicology results came back showing evidence of potassium chloride in levels that couldn't have occurred naturally. Edward spent an hour on the phone with Detective Sandoval explaining the specific levels and the timing of when it entered Dad's system. Detective Sandoval called me right after talking to Edward. She said this was the breakthrough they needed, the physical proof that matched the recording. Her voice sounded excited but professional. She explained the results would be submitted to the DA within 24 hours. Detective Sandoval brought Mom in for another interview the next day with the new evidence laid out on the table between them. Mom's lawyer sat next to her looking tired. Detective Sandoval walked through the toxicology results, the timeline, the recording, and all the other evidence they collected. Mom started crying and finally admitted she gave Dad something to help him sleep that night, something Cyrus provided in a small bottle. She claimed she didn't know it would kill him, that Cyrus told her it was just a strong sleep aid. But Detective Sandoval played the recording again, the part where Cyrus said it should take about 3 minutes and Mom didn't sound surprised at all. Mom's lawyer stopped the interview and asked for a break. The DA filed charges 3 days later. Murder in the first degree for Cyrus. Accessory after the fact for Mom. Detective Sandoval came to my foster home to tell me in person with Brandon present. She explained this meant the DA believed they could prove the case beyond reasonable doubt, that they had enough evidence to convince a jury. I asked what the sentences would be if they got convicted. Detective Sandoval said Cyrus could get life in prison and Mom could get 15 to 20 years. Hearing those numbers made everything feel real and final in a way it hadn't before. Cyrus's arraignment was scheduled for the following Monday at 9 in the morning. Brandon asked if I wanted to go, and I said yes, because I needed to see Cyrus in handcuffs, needed to see that he couldn't hurt me anymore. We sat in the gallery 3 rows back while Cyrus was brought in wearing an orange jumpsuit. He looked thinner than I remembered. The judge read the charges out loud and asked how he pleaded. Cyrus said not guilty in a calm voice. Then he turned his head and stared directly at me in the courtroom gallery. His eyes locked on mine and his mouth moved, forming words I couldn't hear but could read on his lips. The bailiff noticed immediately and stepped between us, blocking Cyrus's view. The bailiff walked straight to the judge and whispered something. The judge's expression changed. The judge asked Cyrus if he just attempted to communicate with a witness, and Cyrus smiled slightly but didn't answer. The judge revoked his bail right there for witness intimidation. The bailiff and another officer moved toward Cyrus while the judge explained he was being taken into custody immediately with no bail option. Cyrus would remain in jail until trial. They put handcuffs on him and led him toward the side door. I watched him disappear through that door and felt something heavy lift off my shoulders. He was locked up. He couldn't get to me. He couldn't hurt me. Brandon put his hand on my shoulder and asked if I was okay. I nodded because for the first time in months, I actually was. Brandon walked me out of the courthouse to his car parked in the lot across the street. He explained during the drive that CPS found a longer-term placement with a family experienced in cases like mine. The foster parents lived 20 minutes away in a quiet neighborhood with 2 other foster kids who were older than me. Their names were Carol and Jim, and they met us at the front door when we pulled up. Carol showed me to my room, a small space with blue walls and a window that looked out at their backyard. She helped me unpack the few clothes I had from the emergency placement and told me dinner was at 6. That first night, I woke up screaming from a nightmare about Cyrus standing over my bed. Carol came in within seconds and sat in the chair by my door until I fell back asleep. She did this 3 more times that week without ever acting annoyed or tired. Ms. Reeves came to visit me at the foster home 2 weeks later carrying a notebook and some printed papers. She sat with me at the kitchen table and explained the court wanted a victim impact statement from me. I asked what that meant, and she said it was my chance to tell the judge in my own words how Cyrus hurt me and what I lost when Dad died. We worked on it together for over an hour, Ms. Reeves asking gentle questions and writing down my answers. When I got to the part about missing Dad's laugh and how he used to make pancakes every Saturday, I started crying so hard I couldn't talk. Ms. Reeves waited patiently and handed me tissues. After we finished, she read it back to me and asked if it sounded right. Hearing my own words out loud made me cry again, but this time it felt different. It felt like my voice actually mattered and people would have to listen. Brandon showed up at the foster home 3 days later with news about the insurance company. They officially denied Mom's claim because of the ongoing criminal case. He sat across from me in the living room and said Mom put in a request for a supervised visit. He asked if I wanted to see her, and I felt my stomach twist up. Part of me missed her so much it hurt, missed the mom she used to be before Cyrus. But another part stayed angry at how she chose him over me and over Dad. I told Brandon yes, because maybe if I saw her, I could understand why she did it. The visit got scheduled for the following Tuesday at the CPS office downtown. Brandon drove me there and we sat in a small room with a table and 4 chairs. Mom walked in 10 minutes late wearing the same clothes she wore to Cyrus's arraignment. She looked thinner and her hair needed washing. She started crying the second she saw me and reached across the table to grab my hands. Brandon reminded her about the no contact rule and she pulled back. Mom kept switching between saying she was sorry and making excuses about how Cyrus manipulated her. She claimed she never wanted Dad to die and didn't know the drink would kill him. I listened for a while and then told her I loved her but couldn't trust her anymore. She cried harder and said I was breaking her heart. I pointed out that she broke mine first when she helped kill Dad. Brandon ended the visit after that because Mom started getting loud and defensive. Edward called Detective Sandoval the next week with his final report. Brandon told me about it during our regular check-in at the foster home. Edward concluded that Dad died from potassium chloride poisoning given to him by another person. The medical examiner officially changed Dad's death certificate from heart attack to homicide. Detective Sandoval said this removed any remaining doubt about what happened and made the criminal case even stronger. The DA started preparing for trial right after Edward's report came through. Detective Sandoval stopped by the foster home to update me on the legal stuff. She explained the DA offered Mom a deal where she could testify against Cyrus and get a lighter sentence. But Cyrus refused any deal and told his lawyer he wanted to go to trial. Mom's lawyer apparently told her to think hard about the plea, because the evidence against both of them was really strong. Detective Sandoval said the DA would probably keep the offer open for a few more weeks before pulling it. I asked what would happen if Mom took the deal, and she said Mom would have to tell the jury everything about how they planned Dad's murder. The thought of Mom finally admitting the truth in court made me feel sick and relieved at the same time. CPS and the school worked together to get me back to full-time classes with some extra supports. I started going every day instead of just a few hours. Ms. Reeves set up weekly meetings with me in her office to check how I was doing. My teachers knew about my situation and gave me extensions on assignments when I needed them. After a few weeks, my grades started going up again. Math was still hard, but I stopped falling asleep in class from nightmares. The other kids mostly left me alone, which was fine because I didn't want to explain where I'd been. Lunch period was the worst because everyone sat in groups and I ate alone. Ms. Reeves let me come to her office during lunch twice a week, and we'd just talk about normal stuff like TV shows and books. My routine started feeling normal in a way it hadn't since before Dad died. I woke up, went to the school, did homework, ate dinner with Carol and Jim, and went to bed without pushing furniture against my door. Brandon scheduled a meeting at the CPS office to talk about permanency planning. Carol drove me there on a Thursday afternoon and sat with me while Brandon explained the options. He said I could stay in long-term foster care with Carol and Jim, or CPS could look for relatives who might want guardianship. I told him I didn't have many relatives and the ones I had lived far away. Brandon said this process would take months, but they wanted to make sure I had stability. He asked what I wanted, and I said staying with Carol and Jim felt okay for now. They treated me well and didn't push me to talk when I didn't want to. Brandon wrote everything down and said he'd start the paperwork for long-term placement. The meeting took less than an hour, but it felt good to have someone ask what I wanted instead of just deciding for me. That night in my foster room, I opened the special box where I kept Dad's iPad. The battery was dead, so I plugged it in and waited for it to charge. When it turned on, I found the voice recording and pressed play one more time. Dad's voice filled the room listing groceries from Aldi. Then Cyrus walked in and everything changed. I listened all the way through, hearing Dad's confusion and Mom's fake sweetness, and Cyrus's cold voice talking about potassium. When it ended, I sat there crying quietly. Then I saved the file one more time, turned off the iPad, and put it back in the box. I pushed the box under my bed where it would stay safe. Dad would have wanted me to keep fighting, to make sure Cyrus paid for what he did. I was doing that. I was doing exactly what Dad would have wanted. Detective Sandoval called Brandon the following week with news about the trial date. The court scheduled it for 6 months away, giving both sides time to prepare. All the restraining orders and protective orders stayed in place. Detective Sandoval told Brandon to tell me that Cyrus would stay in jail the whole time because the judge considered him dangerous. Brandon passed along the message when he came for his weekly visit. Knowing Cyrus was locked up and couldn't get to me made sleeping easier. 6 months felt like forever, but also not long enough. I'd have to testify eventually, have to sit in a courtroom and tell strangers what Cyrus did. But I had time to get ready. I had Miss Reeves and Brandon and Carol and Jim helping me. I had Dad's recording as proof. I had done everything right, told the truth when it mattered, and now the system was actually working. Cyrus couldn't hurt me anymore, and soon a jury would hear everything he did. That had to be enough for now. My therapist gave me nice stationery during our session and suggested I write thank you notes to the people who helped me. I sat at the desk in my foster room that night and started with Ms. Reeves, thanking her for believing me when no one else did and for keeping me safe at the school. I wrote to Marta next, telling her how much it meant that she noticed things were wrong and spoke up when it mattered. Detective Sandoval got a note thanking her for taking my case seriously and working so hard to find the truth about Dad. I wrote to Edward thanking him for proving what really happened to Dad, and to Brandon for finding me a safe place to live and checking on me every week. My therapist told me that saying thank you to the people who helped was part of healing, and writing each note made me feel stronger somehow. I folded them carefully and put them in envelopes, knowing I would mail them tomorrow. When I finished, I looked at myself in the mirror and promised I would be strong enough to testify when the trial came. I owed that to Dad and to everyone who fought for me. On Saturday afternoon, my foster mom asked if I wanted to go to the park, and I said yes. We drove there in her car, and she sat on a bench reading while I walked over to the swings. I sat down and pushed off gently, watching little kids play on the jungle gym and hearing their parents call out to be careful. The sun felt warm on my face, and for the first time in months, I felt actually safe. Not just physically protected, but safe in a way that let me breathe normally. I still miss Dad so much it hurt sometimes, especially in quiet moments like this when I could almost hear his voice telling me to pump my legs higher. But I wasn't scared anymore. I wasn't pushing furniture against doors or sleeping in closets or jumping at every sound. Life wasn't perfect and probably never would be, but I could sit on a swing and watch kids play and feel okay. That was enough for now. That's it for this story. I'm really happy you were here to share it because it makes every upload feel personal. I hope it left you with something kind or comforting to hold on to today. Subscribe and come back whenever you need a little calm.